So we'll go right into meditation. Find your comfortable position. Begin by settling the body in its natural state. By first of all identifying any tension, any constriction, or any pain. And then allowing your breath to be drawn to that tension. And releasing it into space, letting it leave your body. The grasping to superstitions that Lama Yeshe referred to often is felt as constriction and tension in the body. So release and let go. And as you deepen your relaxation with each exhalation, maintain the clarity that you begin your meditation with. And now in this relaxed state, invite your intuition, your deepest wisdom, to guide you through a journey of the imagination. And simply answer this question for yourself. What is my heart's desire? What is my sense of the highest potential of this human life? What is it that when I die will lead me to know that I have lived a life of meaning and purpose? What is the highest potential of this life? It's important that this be your answer, not the correct answer, not a Dharma answer. Just rest in stillness and invite your intuition. Let it speak. And now visualize your pristine awareness, the source of this intuitive wisdom, as an orb of radiant light at your heart, about the size of a pearl. And arouse the aspiration on the in-breath, on the inhalation. May I truly realize my heart's desire. May I take advantage of the great leisure and opportunity that I have to make the highest use of it, to actually achieve this goal, my definition of a meaningful life. So arouse that aspiration on the inhalation, and on the exhalation, visualize this radiant orb of white light flooding your body, filling your body with light, saturating every cell, eliminating all of the obstacles that would prevent you from reaching this goal. So practice on the breath, arousing your aspiration on the inhalation. And on the exhalation, visualize your pristine awareness, filling your body with white light. A second question to ask. What is it that I would like to receive from the world that will lead me to the causes and conditions necessary to achieve my goal? Perhaps this is more time, a car that runs, or something else that would be a support for your achievement of this high goal. And then visualize these causes and conditions just raining down on you. And inhale those conditions then, transforming them into the opportunity to achieve your highest goal. And then again, on the exhalation, visualize that radiant orb of white light, saturating every cell of your body, eliminating all of the obstacles to your achieving your highest goal. The third question is, how would you love to transform your mind in order to achieve this higher goal? What are all the inner conditions necessary to reach your highest potential? And can you connect that to this retreat? How is it that this retreat can aid you in the transformation necessary to reach your highest potential? And again, on the inhalation, arouse the aspiration. May I actually be able to transform my mind here and now in the ways I know are necessary. And on the exhalation, visualize that radiant orb of pristine awareness flooding your body with white light. A fourth question to ask: how can the achievement of my highest goal for myself contribute to the happiness of others? Out of my own individual, unique experience, my own individual genius, my talents, how is it that I can become a cause and condition for others achieving their highest potential? And then practice with the breath again, arousing the aspiration on the inhalation. May I truly be a cause of happiness for others and liberation. And then on the exhalation, visualize this light flooding your body. In the light of your pristine awareness, leaving your body, flooding out through every pore of your skin, and connecting with others. Bringing joy, happiness, fulfillment, meaning and purpose. Helping others to discover their highest potential in your own unique way. And visualize very clearly this goal for yourself, your heart's desire, the highest potential for this life, and the happiness that you can bring to others. And realize that you have everything that you need right now to achieve that goal in this life. And simply recall, do an inventory of your life right now, of all of the fine qualities, all of the attributes of this life. That will support your development of this great goal. And then contemplate that all of these conditions that you have in your life right now, leading to the development of your goal, are going to disappear unexpectedly before you're ready. We don't know when. You're going to die, and the time of your death is uncertain. And allow this to be an inspiration, this knowledge. No reason to despair, but to feel empowered, to take advantage of this very moment. And to recognize that you have these 8 days ahead of you with perfect conditions. And let this realization of the uncertainty of the time of your death motivate your practice during these 8 days. And let your great aspiration for your practice, your goal, be like a magnet drawing you on with zeal, with delight in practice. To move step by step down the path to reach your goal, your highest aspiration for this life. We'll take a 6-minute break now, and then we'll come back and start a silent session at 11:24. So there will be 2 short sessions with another 6-minute break before lunch. So the point of this morning's practice, or the teaching actually, was that in the discovery model, of which Dzogchen is a member of this discovery model, the goal is already present. So Dharmakaya is already present as the nature of the mind. And so we have in our every ordinary moment of perception, pristine awareness is just waiting there, hidden in plain sight, waiting to be discovered. So the question then is, why aren't we aware of this natural state of the mind? And so here's a question for you. Would you say that a mind that is so habituated to stimulation that it would rather administer an electric shock to itself rather than sit quietly is a natural state of the mind? Or is that a very unnatural condition? So this is the condition that we have in our modern era, and especially in the era of constant connectivity, the constant media stimulation. At the University of Virginia in 2014, researchers actually conducted a study to get right to this question of how unpleasant it is for people to sit quietly with their own minds. And so, first of all, the first part of the study, or the initial study, was just to bring undergraduates, I'm sure, into a sterile waiting room, just an empty room with nothing but a chair. And they were asked to sit there for 6 to 15 minutes. And you might think that in a busy undergraduate's life that being able to just sit for 6 to 15 minutes would be a very welcome experience. But what the researchers were surprised to find is that the majority of people actually reported that this was an unpleasant experience. And so then they were curious about how unpleasant an experience it was. And so they then, in the sterile waiting room, they actually put an electric outlet, not quite a 220 or 240 volt outlet, but an outlet that would administer an electric shock that was unpleasant. And so what they were very surprised to find was that 67% of men actually chose to administer an electric shock to themselves rather than to sit quietly in the presence of their own minds. And women were a lot more content at about 25%. And the average, actually, for the men was 7 shocks during this brief period of 15 minutes or less. So it wasn't just wondering, I wonder what that is. And the researchers were also curious about how painful this shock was that they administered themselves. And so they asked them the question, if you had the total wealth that you possessed was $5, how much would you pay to stop this shock? And the average was $2. So that's very significant pain, that you would give 2/5 of all of your wealth to stop it, yet they were seeking it because that was the freedom from resting quietly with their own minds. So this is exactly what Blaise Pascal noticed, the great French mathematician, theologian, father of probability theory, who said, "When I have occasionally set myself to consider the different distractions of men, I have discovered that all the unhappiness of men arises from one single fact, that they cannot sit quietly in their own chamber." And if that was true in the 17th century, can you imagine what he would have to comment about now? So why is it then that we are not aware of the natural state of the mind? It is because our minds are habituated to distraction, to laxity. Our minds are trained to obscure the natural state of the mind. And one of the charts that you have in your appendix, I believe, maybe it's not there yet, the 5 obscurations, it's not there yet, but at some point it will be. Is that in English? So you have it in, some of you have it in the English version anyway, but it's very, very easy to just run through the 5 obscurations. So these are classic, well-known and all throughout Buddhism. But this is the premise here in our approach to shamatha within the Dzogchen tradition, is that the natural luminosity, non-conceptuality, and bliss of shamatha are there waiting to be discovered. And these 5 in particular are what obscures the natural luminosity, non-conceptuality, and bliss, and the mental and physical pliancy of shamatha. So the first of these is hedonic fixation. All of these could be basically a prescription for modernity, or a description of modernity, because these are what we have taken to extremes. So here in our consumer culture, our materialism and consumerism and hedonism all go hand in hand. And so if you have a materialist view of the body, the mind, that basically then the whole point of existence might as well be pleasure, to basically consume as much as possible, to have as much pleasure, because after all, that's all there is. So consumerism and hedonism go hand in hand, and this is the attraction to external things and the obsession with external sources of pleasure as a source of happiness. The second is ill will, malice, resentment, and malevolence, or just this whole family of hostility. So the first you could say is craving. So we're talking about mental afflictions, really, aren't we? The first hedonic obsession is craving. The second really is hostility, basically. That this whole family of hostility, aversion, aggression. And the third is laxity and dullness, and Lama Allen lists depression among these as well. So it's all this depressed, not enough energy. So the first 2 you could think of as the 2 of the primary mental afflictions. The third one is one of the classic problems or faults of meditation balance, of laxity. And the fourth one then is excitation and anxiety. So these are really, you can say that all of these first 4 are basically mental affliction and the 2 meditation faults of excitation and laxity. So this is what is obscuring pristine awareness, substrate consciousness and the natural luminosity, non-conceptuality, and bliss of substrate consciousness. And the 5th of these 5 obscurations is an interesting one, and this is afflictive uncertainty, or afflictive doubt. And this one is described sometimes as like being in a desert track, so you're in the middle of a desert at a crossroads, and you have run out of water, and you know that down each path lies water, but you can't decide which way to go. So you die there, and they find your bleached bones at the crossroads. So afflictive uncertainty is perhaps the doubt that I could possibly do this, that there is some sort of natural state of mind beyond all of the habituated tendencies of a sentient being that I'm so familiar with. Or I could never do that. I see models of it in great beings, but I could never do that. So that afflictive uncertainty keeps you stuck in a place without, it's very different than cutting, burning, and rubbing, the kind of natural skepticism that Buddhism encourages. This is just the doubt that keeps you stuck where you are without moving and without investigating. So the system for cultivating the natural stability and vividness of samadhi is called Shamata in Sanskrit. And we are, first of all, going to just explore a little bit the importance of Shamata within the Buddhist tradition. And actually, Lama Allen has investigated and explored a number of other traditions, everything from Christianity to Sufism, and other Islamic traditions, and etc. And he's found that that shamatha, or something, whatever is called in that tradition, is regarded as absolutely essential to any of the realizations of that particular faith or that particular lineage. And this is what Master Shantideva had to say in Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. The Omniscient One declared as useless all recitation and austerities that are done with a distracted or dull mind, even if practiced for a long time. So this should be a real warning to people whose main practice is recitation and prayers. And if you're doing these with a distracted or dull mind, Shantideva is saying these are useless. One of my lamas told us that in the Pratimoksha vows, gossip or useless speech, the worst example of that is doing mantras with a distracted mind. And so you get the idea that if your mind is distracted, it doesn't matter what your spiritual practice is, it's going to be virtually of no value to you. And then in volume 3 of Liberation in Our Hands, Pabanka Rinpoche says, without quiescence, which is shamatha, this is how the term shamatha used to be translated as calm abiding or quiescence, but translators these days, and among them Alan Wallace, and Alan Wallace translated this volume of the Lamrim Chenmo for the Lamrim Chenmo Translation Committee. He used to translate it as quiescence. Now he just says, use the term shamatha, because it's like bodhicitta. It doesn't need to be translated any longer. It's in common usage, and everyone, it's much better to just use the Sanskrit term and then define it and build up layers of association and meaning with it, rather than to use English terms that you already have associations and meanings with, and that kind of corrupt it or give you a false meaning of it. So here in the Lamrim of Pabanka Rinpoche, he says, without shamatha, practitioners would not be able to generate any of the great realizations that are gained by meditation, such as the realization of emptiness that is taught in the Sutrayana tradition, or the realizations of the generation and completion stages that are taught in the Tantrayana tradition. So again, and if we had more time, I have other citations. I have a long list of maybe 40 citations that all talk about, in this same vein, about the absolute essential prerequisite of developing and achieving shamatha before any of these higher realizations are possible. And shamatha is very appealing, I think, to our modern era, because it doesn't require a belief system. It's really ethically neutral. So there's nothing absolute, there's nothing virtuous itself in developing shamatha, because even a sniper or a safecracker will have very finely adjusted stability and vividness of awareness. If you're working with nitroglycerin and going to open a safe with nitroglycerin, you know that the slightest movement is going to blow you up, so that your focus is going to be exquisite, but it is an ethically non-virtuous activity. So shamatha itself is not virtuous or non-virtuous, but it depends on the motivation that you bring to the practice. So this is why, in particular, the exercise that we did this morning is so important for developing shamatha if you're going to use it to lead beyond being a sniper or a safecracker or a good brain surgeon or something like that. If your goal is to achieve liberation, then your motivation becomes absolutely paramount as you are developing shamatha. And Jason Kappa said that when you develop shamatha, you make your mind serviceable. And he also said in another part of his text, before you develop shamatha, you don't have a mind, your mind has you. And the way that you can really, that we experience our mind having us, basically it seems like our mind is in control and that we are victims sometimes of our minds, or we can't control it, we can't train it. Lama Allen describes this as obsessive-compulsive delusional disorder, but there is actually one of those disorders, so it's not the clinical diagnosis of that, it's the Dharma diagnosis of that. The obsessive quality of our ordinary mind is that it just keeps talking to us, it just won't shut up. It is just constantly chattering. It's like talk radio. Do you have that in France? where people just on the radio, you have commentators that a lot of them political pundits or that it's just all talk radio. There's no music, no news. It's just opinion constantly. So that's what our minds are like. It's just constantly, it just won't shut up. It's the obsessive quality of it. And then the compulsive quality of this mind, this chattering mind, is that it sucks us in. We're listening to something, or phrases and words are going through our mind, memories, fantasies of the future, and we get sucked in by it. We become fascinated by it, and we can't look away from it. It becomes like a compulsive, addictive engagement with it. And then the delusional aspect of it is that this chattering voice in my mind actually is me, and it is describing a reality separate from me. Or it is describing my own reality, but there is a reality. So it is me, and it is describing reality. So once you begin meditating and try to still your attention, the first thing that you notice is exactly how much of your mind is wandering, or how frequently it is. And so you may have noticed that in the 2 sessions this morning right before lunch, that there was an unguided meditation. You were just sitting down, and your mind you could have been doing any practice at all. And so because you haven't learned breath meditation yet in this retreat, because you haven't learned how to work with appearances of the mind, probably a lot of your experience was actually just your mind was wandering, just the everyday experience of what is commonly termed the ruminating mind, where your mind is just, how cows chew the cud. The deer do this also. They're ruminants. And so this is the ruminating mind. You're just chewing the cud over and over again, reviewing the same memory, what he said, what she said, what you're going to say, what you're going to do after this retreat is over, just over and over and over again. So this is one of the first things that you notice in meditation is just how distracted your mind is, how frequently it is wandering. And what are the consequences of this? William James, the great philosopher and often regarded as the father of American psychology anyway, and psychology, the scientific approach to studying the mind along with Wilhelm Wundt, said that, William James was also a great philosopher. And he said that for the moment, what we attend to is reality. So this is when our mind is wandering, this is our reality. We are wandering from episode and episode to episodes of reality, basically. And so it is our attention creates momentary reality for ourselves, our experience of reality. So wouldn't it be nice, then, with this wandering mind, wouldn't it be nice that we had the control of our own minds that we have of our cell phones? Can you imagine if you went to the opera or the symphony or any performance and there was just no etiquette involved and no off switch, no etiquette, no manners, no announcement, please turn off your cell phone at the beginning of the performance. And that this was just not a known custom, and also that there was no off switch for a cell phone. And so during the performance, everybody's phone is going off, and people are answering their phones and talking on their phones, and yeah, this is a great performance, oh, you should be here. It's so great, I can't wait to tell you all about it. Yeah, that violin there isn't what she was cracked up to be. No, I'm a little disappointed in that. And on and on and on like that. So, for the moment, what we attend to is reality. Can we, and luckily there is an off switch for our cell phones, can we actually develop a mute switch for this ruminating mind as well? So this is, later we are going to be working with mental appearances. And Dujam Lingpa's whole approach to develop Shamata actually works with mental appearances. But it's challenging. And so we're going to take a few days to warm up to that. And one of the ways that we're going to warm up to that is by adding a mute switch to the ruminating mind, so that in the beginning, this flow of mental activity is described as a torrent, like you're standing under a mountain waterfall. And so that you can't distinguish individual mental appearances. So we're going to slow the flow of that down, actually, so that we can begin to work with individual mental appearances. But one of the ways that we're going to do that is we are going to, first of all, add a mute switch, and with the hope of just stopping that flow altogether. And Shantideva, again, in the 8th chapter on meditation of Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, described also the consequence of distraction. He said, those whose minds are distracted live within the fangs of mental affliction. Recognizing that mental afflictions are eradicated by insight imbued with Shamata, one should first seek Shamata. To you who wish to guard your minds, guard mindfulness and introspection, even at the cost of your life. This I ask you with folded hands. So Shantideva is emphasizing that if your mind is distracted, you are vulnerable to mental afflictions. And so this is one of the reasons that we want to make our minds serviceable, so that we can really, and this is one of the things that, one of the great benefits that you notice very, very quickly as you begin to develop some training of the mind with Shamata, that the frequency and the severity of your mental afflictions is really reduced greatly. So in the classic description of Shamata in Kamala Shila and Asanga, there are 9 stages of Shamata that are described. And this begins with directed attention, where you are just able to direct your attention to a chosen object and keep it there for only a few seconds, all the way up through level 9 of Shamata, where you are able to effortlessly maintain single-pointed focus without the slightest laxity, without the slightest excitation, for at least 4 hours. So there's a lot of ground to cover between 1 and level 9. But what's very curious and very interesting and very hopeful is that there are only 2 problems that we're working on in that entire path from level 1 to level 9. And that is the family of excitation, distraction over on this hand, and in the other hand, it is laxity or dullness. So all of the path of the 9 stages are just working with more and more subtle expressions of excitation and laxity. And we are developing along the way, as we are eliminating coarse laxity, coarse excitation, then medium excitation, medium laxity, is that we are developing greater and greater stability and greater clarity that becomes vividness. So the goal of the first 4 stages of shamatha is stability, the ability to keep your attention where you place it. And so you can think of these 2 meditation faults as if you are driving down a country road here in France, and you have a long straight road, and you know that even if on a long straight road, if you're not making micro adjustments on the steering wheel constantly, you're going to end up just in the left ditch or the right ditch eventually. So you're constantly having to monitor the changes in the angle of the road, for instance, even if the road is straight. So to stay on the road, you have to keep monitoring your position on the road and making slight adjustments to the left or the right. And you drive on the right side in France, right? The right side of the road, yeah. So in this case then, like in the United States, excitation is in the left ditch, and laxity and dullness are in the right ditch. And there's a reason for that, but it's excitation being, because we don't drive right down the middle of the road. If there's a line down the middle of the road, we don't straddle the white line or the yellow line. We are off in the right half of the road. So we are actually driving down the road as we trying to stay on the road. So this is mindfulness. You could say that successfully staying on the road is mindful engagement with your chosen object. And if you are distracted, you drive off the road into the left ditch of excitation. And if you lose your object due to laxity and dullness, you end up in the right ditch. But for most people, excitation is more difficult to manage than laxity and dullness. Because with excitation, you are on your object, let's just say the tactile sensations of the breath at the nose, one instant, and then the next instant you're off your object, and your mind has gone wandering, and you might be wandering for several minutes and not know how you got from the nose to where you wandered to. So that's more difficult to notice because it happens instantly. And with dullness and laxity, there is a progression. First of all, and so it's more easily noticed, and you can watch the progression beginning with an absence of vivid or clear engagement with your object, and then it just begins to move on down towards real dullness, and then lethargy, a feeling of bodily heaviness, and then finally your consciousness just sinks into itself, called sinking. So you have scattering and sinking are 2 other ways of looking at that problem, 2 problems. So that's why the metaphor has us driving on the right side of the road, because we can notice excitation more easily. And so sometimes for people who are really prone to excitation, meditating in heat is good, or normally the things that kind of dampen your awareness a bit. So after meals can also be beneficial for people who are really prone to excitation, or evenings, or just when the mind doesn't have as much vibrant energy. So driving on the right side of the road. One of the really extraordinary yogis, Mahasiddha, who became also a great figure of Mahamudra, the Mahasiddha Maitripa, states that there are 3 types of shamatha, and we are going to be using all 3 of these types. He said the first is shamatha that depends on signs. And here, signs means external objects, or, we'll just call them external. They are called external objects, even though sometimes those are factors of the mind themselves, but they're something other than awareness itself. So the first is shamatha that depends on signs. The second is shamatha that is focused on conceptualization. And this is where this is a large part of our shamatha practice. Actually, we are going to be developing shamatha while focused on mental appearances. So these are classed as conceptualization. And then third is shamatha that is settled in non-conceptualization. So this is shamatha that is awareness of awareness, merging mind and space. These are the practices in Dzogchen where there is shamatha with no object, but it is only still awareness itself that is all that we're aware of. So we're going to begin with meditation that depends on sign, or shamatha focused on signs. And this practice begins with, first of all, intentionally directing your attention to a chosen object. So this is really, really crucial, because most of the time our attention is drawn to an object without our intending it to be. It is, especially in our media-enriched culture, there are many forces that are competing for our attention. And so you're working, for instance, on a document on your computer, and all of a sudden you hear the ping of the inbox, and your attention is drawn away from what you're working on to the ping of the inbox. So what we are trying to do here with this shamatha focused on signs is to only give our attention where we intend it to be, and not let it be drawn away without our intention for it to be moved. So the question then is, and the first step then is voluntarily and with intention, directing our attention to a chosen object. And then the question is, does it matter which object we direct our attention to? So this is a matter of various opinions in various schools and lineages. And so I know that for the Lam Rim tradition among Gelugpas, anyway, that the image of a Buddha or a holy image is the chosen object to direct your attention to. So it's a visual image. And this was, the first 20 years or so of my experience. This was how I was trying to develop shamatha also. So this can be challenging, because not everyone is has a natural capacity for developing that kind of visualized image and making it so vivid and rich that it is capable of stabilizing your attention. So in most of the traditions that I studied early, which was largely the Gelugpa tradition, that was the only choice available. And breath meditation was only used as a preliminary. Basically, you might count your breath for 20 breaths or something like that, and then go into the visualized image. Well, that is, frankly, for Westerners, that's difficult. And I think that could be part of the reason, frankly. This is just not my not only my speculation, but other people who have tried to meditate in that tradition using that approach, there's a common opinion that maybe that's the reason that shamatha isn't such a well-established practice within the Gelugpa tradition, frankly. You hear a lot of talk about it, but frankly, it's not greatly emphasized. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama also acknowledges this, and in conversations with Alan Wallace, has lamented the fact that within the Gelugpa tradition and within Tibetan Buddhism in general, he says, it has shamatha, even though that we have all of these sources from the great masters who tell us how essential shamatha is, many people now just don't focus on shamatha. It's not emphasized, and people get on to the more alluring practices of stage of generation, for instance, or other practices, even though none of those are going to work, or emphasize analytical meditation rather than shamatha. And that just becomes meditation practice in some traditions. But so it's very helpful to know that that's not the only choice. And in fact, the experience of 2,500 years of meditators, beginning with the Buddha himself, all say that if distraction, the discursive mind, is what is the chief obscuration preventing you from single-pointed attention, that you actually, the best object to choose is the breath. So here are just a few citations then from authoritative figures within the tradition, within the Gelugpa tradition. For instance, Jesongkapa in the Lamrim Chenmo. He says, as there are various kinds of people, from those with a preponderance of attachment to those with a preponderance of discursiveness. So discursiveness means that is this mind that one thought follows another quickly and leads to scattering and distraction. So that is our definition of our modern condition. So as there are various kinds of people, from those with a preponderance of attachment to those with a preponderance of discursiveness, Asanga Shravaka Levels cites an answer to a question of Ravata. Ravata, if attachment uniquely dominates the behavior of a monk yogi, a practitioner of yoga, then he focuses his mind on the object of meditation of ugliness. If hatred dominates his behavior, he meditates on love. If ignorance dominates his behavior, then he meditates on the dependent arising of this condition. If pride dominates his behavior, he focuses his mind on the differentiation of the constituents. And if discursiveness uniquely dominates his behavior, then he focuses his mind on an awareness of the exhalation and inhalation of the breath. In this way, he focuses his mind on an appropriate object of meditation. In particular, if you have a preponderance of discursiveness, then you definitely have to meditate on the breath. If you are a person of balanced behavior or a person with slight afflictions, that is, as explained before, make your meditative base whichever of the objects of meditation explained above most appeals to you. So, depending on what your desired outcome is, to inspire loving kindness, for instance, or to dispel the discursiveness, and for shamatha, this discursive mind is one of the chief obscurations that is preventing you from experiencing the natural state of the mind right now. So this discursiveness is the one that we are wanting to eliminate. This is for us, for most of us, because our object is shamatha, this is the one that is most pertinent to us. And so he says you must choose the focus on the inhalation and exhalation of the breath. And then the Buddha taught mindfulness of breathing as the main shamatha practice. He says in the Samyutta Nikaya, just as the last month of the hot season, when a mass of dust and dirt has swelled up, a great rain cloud out of season disperses it and quells it on the spot, so too concentration by mindfulness of breathing, when developed and cultivated, is peaceful and sublime, an ambrosial dwelling, and it quells on the spot evil, unwholesome states whenever they arise. So this is the power of breath meditation. It is one of the things that you'll discover, and you probably have discovered with breath meditation if you're practicing that, is that it is, even though it is a neutral object, and so there is nothing in itself that is pleasure-inducing, there is something on your continued stable focus on this neutral object that actually induces pleasure and bliss, actually, an ambrosial dwelling, as the Buddha called it. And it disperses and quells on the spot evil, unwholesome states. And there is a reason for that. Why do we call this adding a mute switch, or why do I call this adding a mute switch to the ruminating mind, or to this distracted mind? So if our mind is distracted, we are living between the fangs of mental afflictions, as Shantideva said. So why is this breath meditation? How does this add a mute switch to the ruminating mind? Well, there are 6 primary consciousnesses. And if we are focused single-pointedly on one of the 5 senses, actually the mental consciousness isn't going to get a word in edgewise. And so we can actually add a mute switch. We turn off the ruminating mind by focusing solely, we choose to direct our attention to the tactile sensations of the breath. And to the degree that we're successful on maintaining single-pointed engagement with those tactile sensations, that ruminating mind, that chattering mind, is going to be stilled. It's going to go quiet. And that's why the Buddha would say that it dispels and quells on the spot even unwholesome states. So this is adding the mute switch. And then there is something that neuroscience has documented also. There was a study at Harvard University, that ingenious study that surveyed 8,000 people worldwide, I think it was, with real-time reporting. And it found that when people were had focused attention on an activity or on an object, they reported a high state of well-being, a high state of pleasure, even if the object that they were focused on was an unpleasant activity. In itself was unpleasant, but as long as their focus was engaged single-pointedly and they weren't distracted, that there was something in that alone, even focusing on this neutral object of the breath, that is really pleasure-inducing, the ambrosial palace of the Buddha. So to begin our practice of shamatha focused on signs then, the first point is to intentionally direct your attention. And then the second is to train to sustain your attention where you have directed it. So the first, direct your attention, and then sustain your attention where you have directed it. And this sustaining attention where you have directed it is much more difficult than directing your attention where you would like to. And this is because where our attention goes is the outcome of an unconscious weighing process. We can intentionally direct our attention, but the sustaining of our attention actually is not a conscious decision, because the function of attention in our minds is to alert us to things that are of importance or that are attractive. So the mind, as we are focused on, we place our attention, let's say, on our intended object, tactile sensations of the breath at the nose. And then the attention goes off to something that it considers more important, like, I wonder what's for dinner, or something more alluring, like, something that I'm going to buy when I go home or something. So attention is always shopping around, looking for something that is more important or more attractive than what it's focused on right now. And so what we are trying to do, and unfortunately we can't force our attention to stay where we place it, but we can influence it and we can train it. And the way that we train it is with intention. So this is the power, and this is one of the most important factors in developing stable attention, is the power of intention. So intention basically leads to mental acts, and these repeated mental acts then become habits. So intention leads to action, repeated action leads to habit. This is how we train our minds then, and train attention, even though we can't, with will, maintain our attention where we would like to. Otherwise, we could just decide, I'm going to be single-pointedly focused on the breath, and it would stay there. But we begin to influence it and train it through the power of intention. And Lama Tsongkhapa in the Lamrim Chenmo described this in a heading titled, or the title of the heading is Intention and the Way It Stops Laxity and Excitement. And he cites Asanga's Compendium of Knowledge. What is intention? It is the mental activity of applying your mind. So the intention, the important element of intention is that it is applying your mind to something. It really sets your mind in motion and directs it in a particular direction. It is is the mental activity of applying your mind, having the function of drawing your mind to virtue, non-virtue, or the ethically neutral. This is how you should understand it. For example, iron filings are compelled to move under the influence of a magnet. Similarly, the mental process of intention moves and stimulates your mind toward virtue, non-virtue, or the ethically neutral. So it here refers to an intention that applies your mind to the elimination of laxity or excitement when one of them occurs. The power of intention just can't be overstated. It's one of the the 5 omnipresent factors of the 51 mental factors. There are various different categories. The 5 omnipresent mental factors are the ones that are present in every moment of perceiving attention or cognition. A moment of cognition, any moment that recognizes an object, for instance, involves one of the 5 omnipresent. It's always there to have a complete moment of cognition, is intention. And you can say that perception is the passive aspect of these moments of consciousness, and intention is the active aspect of moments of consciousness. And one of the ways that it really becomes so important in meditation is that intention is a powerful determinant of what the next moment of consciousness will be. It will largely depend on what your intention in the previous moment is. And so if your intention is to remain focused on tactile sensations of the breath in this moment of consciousness, the next moment of consciousness, you have a much greater likelihood that actually will be the case, that your breath or your mindfulness will be engaged with the breath. So the power of intention. You can think of this as like going to the gym and working with weights, free weights. And so it's just the repetitions that are strengthening a muscle over and over again. And here what we are doing with meditation practice is to announce the intention of what your mindfulness is going to be engaged with. And then as soon as introspection notices that you are no longer engaged with your object, your chosen object, you return to your chosen object and reaffirm your intention, and over and over and over again, it is just strengthening that muscle of intention, recognizing that your mind has wandered, and then returning to your chosen object over and over again. And the power of intention is also that I mentioned that the attention is the outcome of an unconscious weighing process. So in some models of mind anyway, contemporary models of mind, there are all of these unconscious minds, you could say, that all have their own agendas, but they all think that they are working towards one goal and that their goal is the best, or that their path to the goal is the best. And so all of these unconscious weighing processes are going to try to get attention by raising their hand and shouting, "Look at me, look at me, look at me." And so when you announce consciously an intention, this becomes information that is available to all of the unconscious minds that this is important, and that so first of all, that this is important. And this is what we are trying to get as a message across to all of the various competing minds that are trying to get attention, to get them to basically recognize that intention is stating that what is most important is continued attention on these neutral tactile sensations of the breath. So really what we are doing in meditation training is holding specific conscious intentions, and a series of these. And I'll describe, as we proceed through the training, how we are going to use intention then at various points of the meditation practice. But basically, that's all that meditation practice is, at its core, is just a series of conscious intentions. And so we are going to begin, the first intention that we are going to begin is to narrow the scope of our attention to we are going to use our intention to narrow the scope of attention in a manageable way. We're not going to start out automatically with trying to maintain single-pointed focus on tactile sensations of the breath at the nose, for instance. But what we are going to do is narrow the scope of attention to only the 5 sense fields. So there are in 6 primary consciousnesses in Tibetan Buddhism, the 5 senses and then the mental consciousness. And so what we are going to do, and you could say that monkey mind, this very familiar term, the way that I like to think of this is that there is a cubicle room floating in space, and in each one of the walls there is a window. And so the monkey is ricocheting around within this room, looking through one window after another, wherever the unconscious weighing process is taking it, whatever is most alluring, whatever seems most important. So it could be sound over here suddenly. That's something new. I have to attend to that. Is that a threat or is that an opportunity? Or something, I see something over here. And so attention then looks out that window. But the monkey can only look through one window at a time in the moments of mind model. So the monkey is ricocheting around between the windows. And so we are going to do is to begin to train the monkey very gently and just paper over one window and allow it to ricochet. First of all, our intention is to narrow the scope of the monkey's ricocheting around the room to only 5 windows rather than 6. So to not look through the window of mental consciousness. So what we are trying to do then is to have, to attend to the 5 sense fields, sight, sound, touch. These will be the primary ones for us because there's no food in front of us and we're not smell isn't so prevalent for us. We're not dogs, so it's not one of our primary senses. So sight, sound, and touch are the primary ones to really work with. And so we're going to narrow the scope to these 5 sense fields, and then we're going to intentionally narrow the scope to only one sense field at a time. First of all, to sound, and then next to tactile sensations. Tactile sensations are more challenging than sound because tactile sensations are occurring in my body, and we have a much more conceptual relationship with sensations in my body than we do with sound. It's much easier to have to attend with bare attention to sound, as the Buddha said, "In the herd, let there be only the herd." So that's relatively easy with sound. So we practice with sound, and then we try to take that same capacity for bare attention. What we do is we shift the intention. Now, to narrow the scope of our attention, we choose a new object to attend to, and basically a field of experience. So we're narrowing the field of experience only to then tactile sensations. And then lastly, we are going to narrow the field of tactile sensations only to tactile sensations of the breath. So progressively what we're going to be doing is refining and changing our intention to just narrow the scope of what attention is attending to until we finally end up with tactile sensations of the breath. So it's very simple, very gradual, very easy use of intention to really begin to take control and to train this unconscious weighing process. So we will do that after a 6-minute break. And when we come back then, the 24-minute session will be divided into 4 6-minute sessions. And then we will go through that progression, sequentially changing the intention from just the 5 tactile sensations to sound, to tactile sensations, to tactile sensations of the breath. Each of them will get a 6-minute session of its own, so you'll really begin to feel the power of intention and develop some success with maintaining your object on that narrow field. And then there will be, so we'll do 4 6-minute sessions with just a 2-minute break between so that you can stay fresh and relaxed. So let's come back at, let's say 2:40, we'll begin again.